Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. We were heading into the deep, winding hollers of eastern Kentucky.
Mm.
It's the early 1920s. You're driving down a dirt road, Highway 52, passing these sharecropper shacks, rough, unpainted wood, mud everywhere.
Right.
And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you see a castle.
It really does look like a fairy tale dropped right into the middle of a coal field. It's got these twin turrets, deep steps, a massive wraparound front porch.
It just dominates the landscape.
Absolutely.
It's known as the Big Ol' House.
Mhm.
And that's what we're diving into today. Not just the architecture, but the family inside it. We're unpacking a memoir that centers on this house in Estill County, Kentucky.
And here's the thing. Usually when you see a house like that, especially in that setting, you think, old money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, a plantation owner or something.
Right. You assume some kind of generational wealth. But that's what makes this story so fascinating. This wasn't built by a baron. It was built by a man named Pappaw and his wife, little Mammaw.
And just a few years before this, they were living where?
In a one-room cabin with a dirt floor.
So this is a rags to riches story.
Sort of. It's more of a rags to railroad story. And as we're going to see, that rich part is, well, it's complicated.
Okay.
This house is basically a microcosm of the entire Appalachian experience in the early 20th century. It's about the shift from mules to locomotives and how a building can hold a family together while also tearing them apart.
Let's start with that shift. Because to understand why this house felt like such a miracle, we have to look at where they came from. You said a dirt floor.
Yeah, let's paint the before picture. Pappaw started as a sharecropper, and in that economy, you own nothing.
Nothing.
You rent the land, you rent the mule, you rent the plow, you are constantly in debt to the landowner. It's just subsistence living.
So you eat what you grow, and if the crop fails...
You starve. They were scraping by. Scraping is really the right word. Little Mammaw is raising their first few kids in a single room. No privacy, no sanitation, just survival.
A life of extreme proximity.
Exactly. And then the catalyst arrives. The 1920s boom.
Enter the L&N Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for those who didn't grow up with train sets, we should probably set the scene here. When we say the L&N came to town, we aren't just talking about a mode of transport, are we?
No. Think of the L&N like Amazon or Google coming to a small rural town today, but on steroids.
Right.
The Louisville and Nashville Railroad was an economic titan.
They owned everything.
They owned the infrastructure. They dictated the flow of coal, goods, and people. So when they laid tracks through Estill County to service the mines, they changed the fabric of reality for these people.
And they needed bodies to work those trains.
Exactly. Pappaw gets hired. And here is the statistic that changes everything for them. He starts earning $6 a day.
$6. Now, I know inflation is a thing, but $6 a day still sounds like pocket change. Why was this such a big deal?
You have to look at the purchasing power and the nature of the money. As a sharecropper, you might see cash once a year, if you're lucky.
Right, after the harvest is sold and all the debts are paid.
And usually you just got store credit. But $6 a day, that is regular, cold, hard, liquid cash. In the 1920s, in rural Kentucky, that is a fortune.
So he goes from, I hope we have enough corn for the winter, to, I have a steady paycheck coming in every single week.
Precisely. It's the difference between survival and ambition. And because, as the story notes, big city mortgages hadn't snaked into the hollers yet, he didn't need a bank loan.
He had cash flow.
He had cash flow. He could buy lumber. He could hire carpenters. He could build the big old house.
So he builds this Edwardian beauty. The source calls it a cathedral where dust motes dance on sunbeams.
Yeah.
It sounds idyllic. They've made it. They escaped the shack.
Visually, yes. But the house is deceptive. The memoir describes it as holding whispers of love, devotion, and betrayal. Because while the walls were new and painted, the people inside, they brought a lot of complexity with them.
Okay, this is where we have to talk about the betrayal part. Or maybe eccentricity is the polite word for it. Because I was reading through the description of the property, and I did a double take. There wasn't just one house on the lot.
This is the twist. In the side yard, Pappaw built a second structure.
A smaller one.
Much smaller. A wood frame building, painted a crisp, clean white.
The White House.
Yes. But it wasn't a guest house. It wasn't for the in-laws.
It was for him.
Just for him.
Wait, hold on. Let's look at the math here. He builds a massive mansion for his family, and then he builds himself a bachelor pad in the yard. That seems, well, pretty selfish, doesn't it?
By modern standards,
Yes.
absolutely. It looks like abandonment. But you have to understand the specific pressure cooker they were living in. And this brings us to the most staggering number in this entire story. Little Mammaw didn't just have a few kids.
She had 18.
18 pregnancies.
I can't even process that. 18.
It's a number that completely redefines the context of the big old house. Imagine the noise, the chaos, the constant physical demands.
Cosmo.
The family joke, which is probably closer to the truth than a joke, was that Pappaw realized every time he stayed in the big house, another baby happened.
So his solution wasn't self-control. It was architecture.
Yeah.
I'm going to build a fortress to protect myself from my own fertility.
Essentially, yes. He built a retreat. The White House had a sitting room, a washroom, and a bedroom. It was strictly a no company, no trouble zone.
Wow.
He could clock out of the railroad job, come home, and physically remove himself from the domestic sphere.
So you have little Mammaw in the main house running what is basically a small boarding school of her own children.
Right.
And he's just across the yard reading the paper in silence.
That's the dynamic. And it just highlights a stark gender divide of that era. You know, he had the privilege of solitude. She didn't. She was the naughty pine holding the big house together.
But, and this is where the story gets so heartbreakingly tender, she didn't seem to resent him for it.
No, or at least she still served him.
Biscuit ritual.
Right. Even with her legs aching, wearing these thick support hose rolled down to her knees, she would cook his dinner. And before she rang the bell for the army of children, she would walk across the yard, toting his biscuits to the White House.
It's such a vivid image. Her crossing that yard, it's like a demilitarized zone between the chaos and the silence.
It's an act of devotion, but it also reinforces the separation. He's the provider, but he's apart.
But let's dig into why he might have needed that separation, beyond just the noise of the kids. We talked about the railroad job being the golden ticket, $6 a day, safe from the mines. But was it really that clean?
And that's the real irony, isn't it? Railroad work was seen as the clean alternative to coal mining.
Sure.
Little Mammaw's own father had worked underground, in the dark, and died of the coughing death black lung. The railroad was supposed to be a job in the fresh air.
But Pappaw was a fireman on a steam engine.
Which means his job was shoveling coal, tons of it, into a roaring furnace. He wasn't underground, but he was still breathing the exact same poison.
He would come home, black as midnight.
Covered in it. So the very thing they were trying to escape, the coal dust followed them.
It literally coated him. And this connects back to the White House.
It does. Remember, the White House was pristine, painted white, clean floors. He wouldn't drag the work filth into his sanctuary.
So he had a cleaning ritual.
He would strip in the side yard. He would wash the slack, that's what they call the coal dust, off his body outside in the open air before stepping into his White House.
And little Mammaw would watch him from the big house.
She would, and the family memory is that she would tear up watching him do it.
Why? Was it just seeing him tired and dirty?
I think it was the realization of the cost. She's watching the man she loves scrubbing off the same black dust that killed her father. It's the realization that even with the fairy castle and the $6 a day, they hadn't really escaped.
The coal was still exacting a toll on his body. That puts the White House in a whole different light. It wasn't just a selfish man cave. It was a sterile room for a man who spent his life covered in filth. He just wanted one place that was clean.
That's it. It was an attempt to control his environment when his work environment was hellish and his home environment was chaotic.
And speaking of hellish,
Yeah.
we kind of glossed over the 18 pregnancies part, but we really need to go back to little Mammaw. Because in the early 20th century, you don't have 18 pregnancies and end up with 18 healthy adults, do you?
Tragically, no. And this is the deep shadow that hangs over the big old house. She buried 5 of those children before they were even old enough to be baptized. 5. The description of the family cemetery is just haunting. It says the tiny graves were like tufts of bright spring grass.
Oh, wow.
It's such a gentle image for such a horrific reality.
It really reframes her resilience. We called her naughty as a pine tree. That's not just a cute country saying. Pine knots are the hardest part of the wood. They divert the grain. They're impossible to chop through.
She had to be that hard just to survive that much loss.
Absolutely. Mountain life was hard on women and babies, as the story says. The big old house wasn't just a place of luxury. It was a container for immense grief.
Eventually, though, that era ends. Pappaw dies in 1955. And with the patriarch gone,
The economics collapse. The $6 a day stops.
and little Mammaw can't maintain the castle or the White House. The physical and emotional upkeep is just too high.
So what happens to the house?
She sells it. And in this twist of fate, she sells it back to the L&N Railroad.
The entity that gave takes away.
It swallows it back up. She moves north to Kenton County, near the Latonia Rail Yard, joining that great migration of Appalachians moving to industrial centers, and most of the surviving 13 kids follow her.
But the house isn't torn down immediately, right? It just sits there, empty.
Sits there empty. And this brings us to the final and honestly the most unsettling part of the story. This is where the narrator comes in. We're jumping forward in time a bit.
Right. The narrator is one of the grandchildren, the child of Della.
Della is one of little Mammaw's daughters, and Della seems to be the one who inherited a lot of the chaos. She had moved north, got involved with a guy named Walter Earl, and it was a volatile relationship. Bar fights, court cases, real trouble.
So when things go south with Walter Earl, she does what people do. She runs home to Mama, or in this case, to Mama's old empty house.
Exactly. She drags the narrator and another child, Nancy, back to the big old house. But now, it's not the bustling home of the 1920s. It's a rotting shell waiting for demolition.
A ghost of itself.
Totally.
The narrator describes a specific memory from this time, sitting on the floor of this empty mansion. And the memory is this strange mix of glitter and blood.
It's very cinematic and strange. The narrator remembers glitter swirling around a photo of Della, who was apparently very beautiful, but also the rusty smell of blood, sharp as broken glass.
And then there's this detail about a birthmark. The narrator has a red birthmark on their chin, and the text says it ached from mountain superstition and a mother's cruel vanity. Can we unpack that?
Yeah, that's a deep cut of Appalachian folklore. There was a widespread belief in maternal impressions.
Okay.
The idea was that if a pregnant woman saw something frightening or experienced a strong emotion, or, and this is crucial, if she had a violent craving or a fright, it would physically mark the baby.
So the implication is that something violent happened to Della while she was pregnant.
The implication is that the violence of Della's life, maybe something that happened with Walter Earl, or maybe something that happened in that house, was so intense that it literally stained the child's face.
And the mother's cruel vanity part.
It suggests Della might have been more concerned with her own drama than the safety of the child, and that scar is the proof.
That gives me chills. It transforms the house from just a building into this witness. It saw the 18 births. It saw the death of the 5 babies. It saw the biscuits crossing the yard. And finally, it saw this mysterious violence involving Della.
And that's why the narrator calls it a scar etched into the house. The house isn't just wood and nails. It's a record of the family's trauma.
It really creates this perfect bookend. You have Pappaw building this house to show the world he was a success, to show he was a railroad man. But in the end, the house revealed everything they were trying to hide.
The separation in the marriage.
The struggle of the children, the violence that followed them.
Architecture always tells the truth, eventually. You can paint it white, you can add turrets, but the floor plan reveals how people actually lived. And the separation between the big house and the White House tells you more about their marriage than any love letter ever could.
It really makes you rethink the whole concept of making it. We look at that $6 a day as the solution to their problems. And it fixed the hunger. They weren't starving on a dirt floor anymore.
Right.
But it didn't fix the hardship. It just changed the type of hardship.
That's a great way to put it. Instead of the simple, brutal struggle of sharecropping, they moved into a complex, modern struggle. Industrial health hazards, family fragmentation, the psychological toll of maintaining a status symbol.
They traded the mule for the locomotive, but the ride wasn't any smoother.
Not at all.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. Next time you go home for the holidays, or even just look around your own apartment, look at the layout, look at where the walls are.
Ask yourself, what behavior is this building encouraging? Who has the space and who doesn't?
If your walls could talk, would they tell a simple story of shelter? Or would they tell a naughty, complex epic of devotion and separation, just like the big old house?
And remember, sometimes the smallest room, the one painted white with the door closed, holds the biggest secrets.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hills of Tull County. We'll catch you next time.